Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to your Innovation, Technology, and General Services Committee. I'm joined by my colleagues, Councilmember Mike Bonin and Councilmember Mitch O'Farrell. Mr. Villanueva, are there general public comment cards we should start with?
None.
No general public comment cards. Great. Unless there is an objection from my colleagues, I recommend that items 10 through 18, which are basically all of the items that need to be destroyed, the extra items, be done on consent. Is there any objection?
So moved.
Great. It's been moved, seconded, and without objection, so ordered. Also, if folks are waiting around for item 7, just to let folks know in advance, that's the 311 app. At the request of the author of that motion, we are going to continue that one for 30 days. So if folks are here for that, I want you to know in advance that that one is going to be continued for 30 days. Again, no other reason than we want to respect the wishes of the author of that motion. So, Mr. Villanueva, would you please read items? Well, we've already done items. Let's start with item 1. Are there any cards on item 1?
None.
Okay.
Item number.
Go ahead. Would you please read it?
Item number 1 is a motion by Council Members Huizar and Blumenfield relative to the feasibility of a direct sale of a city vacant property located at 5021 Mount Royal Drive, Los Angeles, California 900-441, and its evaluation as a surplus city property.
Right. Staff from General Services, please come to the desk.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
This is a direct sale.
And if you first just start by stating your name and title for the record. Just so
David Roberts, General Services, Property Manager.
Great, thank you.
We're working on this acquisition, a direct sale that will be approximately 6 months from completion, and there are no obstacles that are on the table right now for this particular sale.
Great. And is this being done at market rate?
It is, yes. It's only 689 square feet, and the transaction will be $2,000. It's a remnant behind a buyer's property that they'd like to pick up from the city.
Right. Straightforward. Any questions from colleagues? No.
Just a quick question. How do we? This one doesn't sound like it's something that you would put to auction just because of the location and the uniqueness of it. But when do we determine what gets auctioned and what gets a direct sale?
Generally, an auction will be determined by the size of the property. And this is not an independent site, so it would have to be an adjacent owner-only purchase. So that's the basis of using.
Okay.
Great. So unless there's an objection, this item will be approved. Without objection, it's approved. Okay. Let's move on to item 2, Mr. Villanueva.
Item number 2 is an item that was continued from May 30, 2013. It's a motion by Councilmember Buscaino and Perry relative to acquiring the property located at 406 North Gaffey Street in San Pedro for the development of Phase 2 of the Gaffey Welcome Park. Mr. Chair, we have one card for this item.
We have one card for that item. Great. Why don't we start with a public comment on that from Anna Dragan. If you could come forward.
Good afternoon. My name is Anna Dragan, Small Business Liaison with Councilman Joe Buscaino's office. Thank you for allowing me to speak. This is a very important project in our council district that we've been working on for several years now. We're eager to see it move forward. I'm here to offer a verbal amendment to the motion to include to state as following. Amend the motion to authorize GSD and Rec and Parks with assistance of the city attorney to prepare and present any documents necessary, including but not limited to a purchase and sale agreement to effectuate the acquisition of 406 North Gaffey Street in San Pedro.
Any comments from General Services?
No, we are on track to make this acquisition by the end of this month, hopefully.
Great. So, again, it's fairly straightforward. Any questions or comments from my colleagues? No? Okay, then I'm going to move that this item be approved as amended by Mr. Buscaino's office, the author of the original proposal, so he's amending his own proposal. So unless there's an objection, it would be so ordered. Without objection, it's so ordered. Thank you. Item number 3, Mr. Villanueva.
Item number 3 is an Information Technology Oversight Committee report relative to a contract amendment with CDI Technologies and Solutions Incorporated for supply management system replacement and performance budgeting implementation.
Thank you. And are there any public comment cards on this?
No cards, sir.
No cards. Great. So we have staff from ITA and the CAO's office coming to the table. As soon as everybody's settled, go. Please.
Good afternoon. I'm Melissa Fleming with the CAO. So I'm actually here representing the Information Technology Oversight Committee, which is a 3-member committee comprised of the CAO as the chair, the CLA, and the mayor's office. The ITOC approved a joint report from ITA, the controller, the Department of General Services, and the CAO, which recommended a contract amendment with CGI to begin the process for supply management system replacement, or SMS replacement, and performance budgeting implementation. Funding was allocated for both of these projects in the 13-14 adopted budget. The city's current financial management system, FMS, was implemented in 2011 and utilizes CGI's Advantage Enterprise Resources Planning software solution. The ERP product was selected through an RFP process, and it includes financial management, procurement, human resource management, and performance budgeting components. So while the city selected this ERP through an RFP process, we've actually only implemented to date the financial management component, which is the FMS system. So the contract amendment that we're requesting today would begin the process to look at turning on effectively both the procurement and the performance budgeting components of the software solution. Transitioning to CGI's products will allow the city to replace 2 aging systems, SMS as well as the CAO's existing BRASS budgeting system. And additionally, there are a number of other efficiencies that are described in further detail in the report that we think could be achieved by consolidating all of this data, the financial budget and procurement data, into one consolidated system. So what's before you today is a request from ITOC to approve a contract amendment with CGI and an associated transfer of funds in order to initiate both of these system replacement projects.
Any other comments from staff? So at the end of the day, the thought is all of these platforms will be able to talk to each other.
That's the goal, correct. So right now, the BRASS system operates in complete isolation from either of the 2 systems. SMS does effectively link to FMS, but there is some reconciliation issues and other items that I'm sure ITA and GSD could talk to. But the goal at the end of the day would have one consolidated system to sort of facilitate the transfer of data seamlessly as opposed to what we have today, which is sort of disparate systems sometimes operating in isolation, which has caused us some difficulties.
Very important goal to get the city talking to itself all in one language and get all the agencies. I mean, that's something I wholeheartedly support. Is there a ballpark on what the costs will be, the implementation costs?
So as of today, what's before you as far as the contract amendment is to look at what CGI refers to as the envision phase, which is sort of the planning phase for implementation. So at the end of this envision phase, which is scheduled to be February or March for both of these projects, we would get effectively the full cost quotation from them for implementation of both the modules. And as of today, we don't have that cost.
Or even just a ballpark? I mean,
I'm not sure if we have a ballpark even today. I don't believe so. We would be coming back as part of likely the budget process for next year requesting funding for the implementation for these 2 systems.
or number of zeros? No, I don't know.
At least 6.
At least 6 zeros. Okay. Well, that's a ballpark. At least 6, maybe 7. Okay. The training component is part of this envisioning phase. I want to make sure that part of this includes appropriate training, because sometimes we get great systems and then nobody knows how to use them and all the problems that stem from that. Is that explicitly mentioned in the...
Todd Bowie, Office of the Controller, and basically what we'll get out of this initial round here is going to be kind of an initial fit gap of the system that CGI has versus our business requirements. And then from that, they'll be able to come forward with a kind of a good estimate as to what the project will cost in order to build something out based on their technology that will fit our business needs. Subsequent to that, so come this spring probably, we'll need to go through some additional analysis in order to kind of determine what is the overall project plan going to be, what are some of the other details that need to be brought together in order to proceed with the project successfully. We'll certainly then initiate the mapping out of the different elements of the project. There will be a significant amount of testing obviously involved, and training also will be part of that discussion as well. And so ultimately there will be a training component for those individuals who will be involved in this system. But that won't be mapped out in this initial part of the process. Once we kind of get the go-ahead with the full project and the system begins to be built, there will definitely be a training component.
Please, go ahead.
If I may, Jose Alvarez, Technical Manager in the Information Technology Agency. And adding to Todd's comment and addressing your specific question, I can speak from experience. I was part of the implementation of the financial management systems with the core modules of the ERP package that Melissa was referring to, and we are dealing with the same vendor, and we're following the same methodology. And our implementation of the FMS system training was a huge component of our implementation and a key factor for the successful implementation of FMS. And I can assure you, based on my prior experience, that training will be a major component of the implementation.
Great. Colleagues, any additional questions? How does the SMS project budget compare to the performance-based budgeting project?
So the performance-based budgeting project, what we're looking for right here is the complete envision phase that we refer to. So at the end of this process, we would effectively be ready to start the next phase of the process, which is actually implementing the new system. So the supply management system, on the other hand, they sort of split the envision phase, as we're talking about, into two parts. So this first part for the envision phase would look at sort of the beginning, the fit gap analysis, as Todd mentioned. So for the performance budgeting portion of the project, that's about $635,000. And then for the supply management system in here, as we're discussing it, it's about $500,000.
And that's just for the study component of this prior to going forward with the actual projects.
Okay. Well, I think we're good on this to move forward with the proposal and proposed addition. Unless there's an objection, this item will be approved. Without objection, it's approved. Thank you. Thank you. Let's move to item 4.
Item number 4 is an Information Technology Agency report relative to the Time Warner Cable digital equipment and programming changes.
Great. And any cards on this item?
None, sir.
No cards. Great.
Good afternoon, Chairman Blumenfield, chairpersons, and council members. William Imperial, ITA, if you recall, I'm the cable guy. This matter comes to you because Time Warner Cable gave notice to ITA, which received such consumer service notices for major changes to their system by way of programming changes or equipment changes or rate changes. And we oftentimes bring these matters to council if we feel that they're significant enough that council should know about them, because you're going to get the phone calls from your constituents about these price increases or equipment changes. In this particular matter, we got notice that Time Warner Cable intends to implement, beginning today, the adoption of the digital adapters that will be necessary for their analog TV subscribers. If you have a digital TV, you're not going to be affected. If you have an analog TV, an old type of TV, then you're going to need a digital adapter. Time Warner Cable has notified ITA that the digital adapters will be free until December 31st, 2014. After that, all analog TV subscribers that need that digital adapter will be charged 99 cents a month. And that is the notification that we wanted to ensure that the council received from ITA.
I'm trying to understand how many people this would affect. When did they stop making, I don't know if you know this, analog TVs? In the 80s?
Well, they would have had to have transitioned those at the end of the 90s for sure.
Oh, at the end of the 90s. Okay.
Correct.
So I'm just trying to think. So any analog TV that's out there has got to be at least 13 years old. Probably
Yes.
longer, older.
If I had to venture a guess, that would be true, yes.
and the life expectancy on a TV, I guess that could be like 20 years. So you could have, 10 years worth of TV.
I had one until a year ago.
An analog? All right. Well, there you go. Got a good example. I'm trying to. It's why we wanted you in the IT committee, because you're so up to date.
But I watch everything on Netflix, so it doesn't really matter.
Just trying to get a sense of how many, the scale of this problem. And it's anyone who has an analog TV, or if you have a digital converter already, then you're okay. If you had is it all analog TVs?
If you already have a converter, you're not affected.
Right, and a number of people would have converters already.
The converters that Time Warner Cable, right, has allowed its signal to be passed through. Yes, there are digital boxes that have that capacity, and if you're already on that system, you're not affected.
So it only impacts folks who are getting Time Warner Cable signal, but haven't had a digital box. And I don't know what the percentage of people who don't have a digital box. It doesn't affect it if you get in the rabbit ears, because you have your digital converter for that already. You have to have.
That's correct.
So it affects that subset. I don't know. Is there any way to quantify that?
There is not. We've asked Time Warner to clarify that issue of affected subscribers, and under state law, they don't have to provide that information to local entities anymore. And so if their competitors don't provide digital penetration numbers, they don't have to provide those numbers to us as well. They've told us that it's a small number. I have no idea what that means.
And then the other piece is that if they need to install, even though it's basically two, it's an in and an out, but a lot of the folks who have this would probably be elderly, and that might be an issue. It's $40 to install it, right?
That's correct. It's $39.99 for the installation charge. It's a site visit, because the installation is not that complex, but more important, or laborious. But more importantly, the elderly or the disabled probably could be impacted, and we were worried about that. So hopefully, Time Warner Cable will work on that number.
Colleagues, any questions?
You've mentioned it until it's December of 2014.
December 31st of 2014.
Okay.
Correct. And Time Warner Cable has provided on their website a specific link for anybody that has any questions, so you could tell your staff that. And they are willing to work with ITA if it escalates with any one person.
That'll give the Mike Bonans of the world over a year to adjust.
It takes me a long time to adjust to change. When were these subscribers notified?
Well, according to Time Warner Cable, they were notified 30 days ago, if not just before that. And that's what federal law and state law requires, a 30-day notification.
And how were they notified?
By mail with their bill.
So like in the tiny little small print that nobody ever sees?
I have to work with Time Warner Cable as a regulator on this side, so yes.
Yeah.
I believe that they've told us that they have told me that they sent out 2 separate notices. We have staff that have Time Warner Cable, and they've only been able to verify 1, by the way.
Could you send each council officer, council member, an email with a little FAQ about this that we could send to our field staffs? Because they're the ones who are going to get the questions and have to give some answers and direct people. If it's just some of the basic questions and how to refer people, that would be very helpful.
Yeah, we could do that.
Thank you.
Yeah, if we develop a template, we could put it on websites and help get the word out and be constructive in that regard. Because there's not a lot we can do about this. This is really an informational item, but that's a good action item for us to be able to help with our constituents.
It is, and on the city website, too.
We can do that. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. We actually need to I think we have to formally report this item. Is that so? I move that this be noted and filed. Unless there's an objection, we will note and file this report. And we'll move on to item 5.
Item number 5 is an item that was continued from August 13 and 27 of 2013. It's an ITA report relative to the development of a citywide municipal Wi-Fi initiative. And we don't have any cards on this.
No cards. So if we could have the ITA staff come forward. Mr. Renneker.
Good afternoon. Steve Renneker, General Manager for the Information Technology Agency. We now have a draft RFP that is in legal review right now. that will be coming to this committee within the next 30 days. That right now what we're doing is we're meeting with all the departments collectively that have assets that potentially are the give inside the RFP that we're detailing. So there's a lot of appendices that need updates so that we're very clear to all the bidders exactly what the city is willing to give up from this effort, or at least potentially negotiate. So we expect those to be completed by end of next week, and then we'll be ready to forward a draft on for your consideration and review for consideration for City Council release.
Great. Well, this is a very exciting work. We're probably going to keep talking about it at every meeting that we have, getting a little updates on it, because it's potentially a massive project and an exciting one to really transform this city. I had a question about your report where you want us to adopt the recommendations, and item 3 I didn't quite understand the purpose behind it. The limit neighborhood empowerment and other city-funded Wi-Fi hotspots for a median income of $45,000.
Let me see number 3 here.
The other ones all not only, and this may be a perfectly good one, the other ones not only made sense, but just I was excited about it. And this one...
So on neighborhood empowerment, they have a number of conversations going on where they provide and they fund their neighborhood councils with certain dollars. And I think a few of them have decided that they would like to roll out broadband in particular areas. So the recommendation is, rather than just rolling it out, because potentially if this RFP is awarded and it potentially replaces a lot of these other community efforts, then it would be almost a waste of those neighborhood councils spending those monies in something that maybe only lasts 2 or 3 years and then is replaced by something a little larger. So the recommendation would be for those communities of need and targeting the low income, 45,000 and less, that it might make sense because it might take 2 to 3 years before there would be full deployment over those areas, that maybe it might make sense, especially for those neighborhoods that are maybe part of the LAUSD one-to-one mobile pilot where the children might need access where they don't today. That might make sense.
Yeah, I guess, off the cuff, and I'm willing to be convinced otherwise, my feeling is we should let them all know that this is happening so they don't waste their money. As you say, it could be a waste of money. But at the same time, not make that judgment for them and say, hey, if you want to waste your money, you're welcome to if you find that the value is that strong, and not sort of set a limit on the dollar value. Because I can imagine reasons why a community with a different income might decide that it's worthwhile for them to do so. I would want them to be fully informed that we're moving forward with our Wi-Fi proposal, and so they may not, it may not make the most sense to any of us sitting around the table, but I like the fact that they have that kind of autonomy, and
very good.
They can make those mistakes if they want, or if they value it, or do the right thing if they want. But I'm open to being convinced otherwise and hearing other thoughts about it, either from my colleagues or from you or your staff.
Question, Mr. Chair, are you exploring partnership possibilities with LAUSD in relation to what they're doing? The whole iPad thing, that's a different topic, but in terms of access, ability to free Wi-Fi, they're moving in a certain direction. I think we're moving in a certain direction, and maximizing our resources together. Will that be referred to at all, perhaps in the RFP, or?
It is actually referred to in the RFP, and there actually is a 2-page letter from LAUSD with their support for this initiative. And part of the design of really 2 networks, if you will, we're calling this an LA Community Broadband Network, of which there's requested to be a fiber to the home component. So if there was broadband connection to the home, one would assume that there would be a wireless component that would be indoors for those students to be able to leverage. And then there's also the Wi-Fi component, which is a ubiquitous outdoor coverage for wireless, which is what we're asking for, so that those students also that wanted to go away from their home would also be able to have access on their mobile devices that are being issued by LAUSD.
Terrific, and I would think it's a given that security issues are, especially with students, are addressed as well.
Yeah, LASD is coming up with the security implementation and the features there. I know they've had some challenges with the amount of devices they're rolling out and doing it so quickly, but certainly that'll be a major component of it.
Terrific. Thank you.
Yeah, great point. And it's on your report as well about folding in and supporting LAUSD, and we're all supportive of that, and that's a great aspect of the report. So we're pleased about that and being able to, I guess, provide some synergy with our school district. Your report also, you talk about some of the other cities. Do you want to touch on some of that? What we've learned from some of these other cities on, like.
Well, some of the things that we've learned, a lot of the design and requirements that we put in the RFP are based around fiber projects that are already out, including the Gig University project, which actually was formulated in 2009 with the Obama administration. This was to provide a 1 gigabit service to all the research universities, at least of about 25. So there were some community efforts that were done in North Carolina where they leveraged that effort and that backbone to build out a community-wide free component. That's currently in the RFP phases, so a lot of the details that are not really clear on what's going to be awarded, but we do know the design and implementation is under discussion, and there were at least 9 respondents to that RFP. We've also followed the implementations of Google in 4 cities, one being Austin, of which we just saw the announcement of AT&T competing with Google in that city. That might provide a similar infrastructure that would be of interest to the city of LA. So that is something that we're following closely as well, and certainly the requirements of the RFP would provide some similarity to let vendors like that be able to respond.
The report also mentions Wi-Fi at City Hall and City Hall East. We also, including Van Nuys, the other city facilities.
We're not at this time. So right now, where we're at is, and it's one of the items we're going to report back on, but it's about $30,000 per floor. So we've purchased the infrastructure to manage and support both public and private over a common device. So that we're probably about 2 to 3 weeks away from being able to roll out. Then this floor, it's taken us a long period of time just to get the vendors in place to do the physical installation up in the ceilings so that they're not subject to vandalism or theft. So we expect this floor to be done probably within the next 30 to 60 days. And then we have a number of floors, which will be the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 10th floor of this building. And then it'll be all the floors where the city attorney and the controller are in City Hall East. And that'll be the limit of the scope of the project that we're involved with. As other departments have a particular need and a budget for it, we'll certainly work with them and roll it out.
The Economic Development Department is on the 13th floor, and I believe Mr. Cole's office is on the 17th floor? So those 2 floors won't get Wi-Fi?
That's correct.
I recommend you might add Mr. Cole's.
I will follow up shortly after this meeting.
Any additional questions? Without hearing another reason for the item for number 3, I think I'll skip that one on the, I'm going to move the recommendations. Again, I'm not completely opposed to it. I just wanted to understand it better, but for the moment, what I'll do is I'll just recommend we move forward with recommendations 1, 2, 4, and 5, that they be adopted, and we can maybe continue discussion on number 3, and just so I and my colleagues can understand that one better, or maybe refine it a little bit more if need be. So without objection, we will do that, recommending recommendations 1, 2, 4, and 5, and direct ITA to report with additional information on recommendation 3. So without objection, so ordered. And we'll move on to item 6. Thank you by the way, thank you very much. We're excited about that the Wi-Fi proposal.
Thanks, Steve.
So, Mr. Villanueva, number 6.
Item number 6 is a motion by Council Members Micho, Parral, and Blumenfield relative to the Zone Information and Map Access System mobile application.
Great. And are there any cards on this?
No cards, sir.
Great. In fact, Mr. O'Farrell, this is your motion. Do you want to start us off? any opening words about this one?
No, I'm just looking forward to the report.
Great.
Thank you.
So, we'll get a...
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me today to showcase our ZMAS application to the panel. My name is Tim Key, and I am in the Systems and GIS divisions of Planning Department, and I'm responsible for ZMAS. And so today I'll give you a very mini, short, I understand 10 minutes version of the application. Okay. We usually take an hour and a half or so to go through the whole
Council members, we don't have that kind of attention
sure.
span. You know?
So, I'll just sit through most of the features and focus on the features I think would be of interest to council members. ZMA application was the first GIS application that was deployed in the city back in 1999, and we were also the first in the U.S. that was deploying online application that does not require any downloads or plugged in order to use a map. So since then, we already have evolved and expand into integrating multiple source data from different city agencies as well as third-party data sources such as the LA County Assessor's Office. So the whole idea is to allow users to come to our site, search for a particular property, and using their mouse or other navigational tool and be able to click and keep going without being able to having to log in and log out to different systems. We currently have two versions. The public version is basically you reach our public website by going to zmas@lacd.org. In addition to that, we also have another internal version, which is also accessible for all internal staff within the firewall. Essentially, the two versions are exactly the same. The difference is the public version, we filter out certain property information such as like names and addresses of property owners for privacy reasons. And so for a demo today, I'll just use the intranet, which is the internal version. So to access ZMAS, you simply go to our web URL, and the first screen you'll see is basically provide you a various way to search for your property. Most of the users are familiar with their addresses, so they'll be entering their house numbers and street number. In addition to that, we also give them other means to search by intersections, or let's say they kind of know what district they're interested in, but they're not sure specifically the address. They can zoom into, let's say, City 3, and the map would take them directly to the area of interest. And from there, they can keep zooming in and select the parcel accordingly. So for this demo, I'll just use one of the commercial property on Sunset. And the address is 6360 Sunset. And as you can see, the default page, it's pretty much divided into two sections. You got the left-hand side, which is all the data tabs, are kind of grouped into 10 different subcategories. And then on the right-hand side, you have the map. And as a default, you see a generalized area zoning map, basically grouped by different colors. Red here represent commercial, and then here's the highest density residential in yellow. And in addition to that, you also have various background layer to toggle to. So for example, if I'm interested in finding out what was this parcel here look like back in 2001, I can toggle to that layer. And for research purposes, this is really helpful when you're trying to compare from year to year. We generally get this data feed from the overall county-wide area photo about 3 years span. So the next refresh would be 2014, and we look forward to include that as well. And to navigate, it's very simple. You zoom in, zoom out, you pan, just like Google Maps. By the way, we implement this before Google Map. Even though I love Google Map, but ours is much more precise down to the parcel. So on the map size, you can navigate and basically interact with the map by using these little buttons here. And I'm not going to go into all of them. What I want to point out a few things is basically the area maps, and the rest of the time I'll just highlight some of the key feature within the data tab side. So I'm going to expand this a bit so I can see from this angle here. So as you can see, the data is grouped into 10 different data tabs, starting from very basic general parcel information, such as lots and assessor numbers and so on, zip code, down to, let's say, jurisdictional area based on geographical or demographical area. So from here, you can also, if I'm not sure which council district, you could click, and it takes you directly to the council district website from there. And this is all the parcels.
That was fast. You just did that picture today. Nice job, Mitch.
Thanks.
Oh, it's
We're on
a
it.
live demo. So. One of the cool links that we connect with building safety is the building permit information. So, for example, if I want to find out what's going on with this parcel in terms of like permits and any violations and so on, I can just click on that link, and it will bring up all the records that have been recorded by the property activity report. So, for example, here you can see there are 26 entries, and you can click on any of these, and it'll bring up different reports that's been in the database. So, when I mentioned, let's see, coast enforcement. This is any violation. So, like, you could, let's say you want to find out what's going on in a parcel next door. You can also come here and click on these links as well.
Can you do that without having to click on the individual property? Like, can I look at, say, that address and be able to do a query so I can find out where on that block there may be a code violation or something like that?
This is linked to the LA DBS system.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not too familiar with other search methods. We just know by the PIN number, which is what the key that we're passing between the systems.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're saying you'd like it if you could sort of hit Control-Shift and darken in 6 different parcels and then get an expanded
Yeah,
list.
I mean, ultimately, I'd love us to have a system where you could do that for a neighborhood and see, how many liquor licenses are there, what the crime reports are, how many pending developments there are, get all the information we have all in one place.
From property to property and get all that information.
Right.
You just have to self-click. But to get a more global report.
Yeah.
As of now, it's per parcel. This is per parcel.
Would it be very difficult to do that kind of a feature and add that to be able to, select multiple parcels and get a more expansive list?
Or geographic
We
area.
currently have the ability to select multiple also. For example, here I got one. I could also add additional parcel as well.
So you can.
But as far as presenting
Okay,
it,
do that.
we
The
have to
radius
look
tool
into it.
does that. The radius tool does that then.
Correct. Which
Okay.
I'll show you
So
quickly.
you can expand that and then get a list of all of the violations in that area. Is what-
Yeah. But currently, it's only per address.
Okay.
That's how we link to the building safety system. But if we were to, let's say, take it to the next step and want to present it in a different, we could do that.
Maybe I can help a little bit. Councilmember Eva Yuan McDaniel with the Planning Department, Deputy Director of Planning. Currently, the ZIMA system is linked to a website that LADBS has, and we do not have access to their database. Technically, what you're asking is doable. It's all just passing a query into the building safety database and then draw the data that you're asking for, such as violations or permits in detail information. But today, because we're just accessing a website that they put out, that is not available. But it's definitely doable.
Thank you, Eva. And moving on, under the planning and zoning tab, the point that I want to highlight here is basically the zoning code. Oftentimes we get called from constituents trying to figure out what certain codes means, and in the past they would have to look through our codes, and it's rather cumbersome and difficult. So what we do is, this is a C4, which is commercial zoning. We link to our live AM Legal website, and this is updated constantly by American legal corporations. And every time there's a change to the zone code, this gets updated as well. So as we are also working on the RICO LA project, when that's done, we also will be updating that as well.
Some old uses there.
The information I mentioned earlier where we filter out, this is the owner names and so on. So on the internet side, you will not see these. What you'll see is, instead of the owner name, we'll have a little padlock indicating that that is not available to public. For case info, this is what's really handy here is for this particular parcel, we have all the cases that's relevant. For every case, we also have a link to our case information system. So for example, if I'm interested in finding out what this case number, CPC 2007, 5866, I can click on that. What it'll do is automatically link to our case information application. And this is a very quick way for people to find out exactly who the staff assigned, how to get a hold of this person, and so on. In addition to that, you can also look at key dates that's been published, as well as get any documents. For example, down here, you can download the determination letter for that particular case number. And this is all within a few clicks. Just an FYI, at the last part of this presentation, I'll just show you the web application that's now live that basically takes this desktop version and put it into mobile version. So I just want to come back to that later. For the mailing label, this would be, I think, quite useful for your council member staff. Let's say you need to notify a certain number of residents within a particular radius. Like, let's say for this parcel, you want to contact all the property owners within 500 radius. You could do that by going to reports and click on mailing label and run. And from there, you could do a CSV, which is a standard Excel spreadsheet, or you could have the Avery format where you can print them into 3 columns and basically have the labels ready. And as you generate a report, it basically gives you a preview of what the parcels that would be included in the report. And what it's doing right now is basically querying all the database with the assessor's office and trying to pull all the addresses that's relevant to these parcels. And I've saved the printouts so that I can show you what they look like. Essentially, it's a 3-column, and we also attach the certified neighborhood council address as one of the mailing as well. And we also attach the map, legend, and so on, so they can do this on their own. And then for the Excel report, it's basically, we're dumping all the columns, so this way you can slice them and dice them however you need to before you send out the label. So going back to the planning tool, as I mentioned, the case information, where I give you a quick summary of the case information. We currently have implemented this app out in the Google Play ecosystem, and this is all free. And what you do is, if you have a Google phone, you can just go to their Google Marketplace and have LA Planning Toolkit, and our logo will come up. All you need to do is just download, and from there, it basically brings up a very quick and easy app for you to put on your phone so that you can enter a case number in here and automatically find out the status of your case, who's assigned, and so on. You don't have to write all these long case name. And in addition to that, we also implemented, so this is like a picture of what the app looks like. Give you, to find a case, search address. What I want to point out is that we also have a QR code. For most of the smartphone nowadays, everyone has a QR code reader installed. So what we want to do is somehow tie that to the case number. About 2 years ago, we implemented the case QR code. So for every invoice, we embedded the QR code that's specific to this invoice. So as the applicant pay for their case, they can just scan this, and automatically the case is stored on their phone. Well, we want to borrow that concept and expand it into this app. So basically, I could click on this and be able to pull up the case number as well. And this is already in production. We are working on bringing this up into the iPhone as well. And that takes longer because there is more stringent testing and so on. That concludes a quick, probably 10 minutes, 12 minutes.
Oh, this is great.
It's good.
How is it? Is this going to be tied into the 311 app as well in some way, or how is that going to happen?
Actually, the future plan, I'm not. I'll reserve that for you to answer if there's.
Well, I'm happy to. One of the things that the ITA is looking at is the development of a portal called City Blocks. And so when 3DI, who's developing our 311 CRM, comes out with MyLA 311 version 2, we're going to take a look at that time of inventorying all the mobile apps that exist. There's about 48 in the city today. So we've developed a concept that we hope by the end of the year will be the design for how this new portal will look going forward, and hopefully be live with it around the time that version 2 goes live. So we're saying to the departments, keep innovating, keep delivering your mobile apps, and at some point we're going to be able to just go to MyLA 311 to basically point to all available apps that are available from the departments from a mobile platform perspective.
That's great. And so they can be sort of subfolders on the 311 app, if you will, and so you can download one big app and be able to get to this, which is a really important one, app. So that's great.
So this was a great presentation. ZMS is wonderful. I used it for 11 years, practically daily when I was on staff of my predecessor. And so we're going to have the Department of City Planning Toolkit app, which is available very, very soon, right?
On the iPhone. Right now
on the
we
iPhones.
have it on Android.
Okay, yeah. So that's, but it's on the iPhones. So will ZMS be available on? That's the big. Will we have the mobile application for ZMS eventually? And maybe Steve just answered that for us.
ZMS, when it's developed, hopefully next fiscal year, it will be integrated into not only My 311, but also Build LA system. Because like Steve said, each department has its going its own pace in terms of innovation. But in the end, we all have to come as one family.
Sure.
So in regards to the ZMS app, because in the past years, the GIS technology and the web technology had not really emerged as much. And right now, recently, the city just signed a new contract with the ESRI, and we're getting a lot of new tools, and either free or with a discounted price. And we will now have the tools to move forward. And the planning department is very, very likely submitting a budget request for next fiscal year to go full force in building we call the ZMS, and we already have the concept and a white paper written for that. And my appreciation to the systems and GIS staff, they took their own initiative to get this going. And I think with the GPS technology and with new GIS technology and also web technology, not only we can put ZMS out there for the public to use, we can use ZMS as a tool to collect information from the public. For example, someone goes to Hollywood nightclub, wonder whether they're in compliance of their conditions, whether they're operating past their hours. They can use their GIS technology on their phone, right away find their location and get the information, and if they have any concerns, they can right away tweet it or send it to the planning department. We'll have it real time. So those are the things we're after. We want to make ZMAS more agile and more accessible and a two-way conversation, not just one-way information sharing.
Fantastic. That's exactly what I was after with this as well. And just, I encourage site visits by city staff and council staff. And there's nothing like going to a site, having a conversation about it, and just being able to stand there, get all the information about the particular parcel. I just think it's going to be so helpful just on the ground, not just in the office, but on the ground as well. And I think it's a huge step in the right direction. So thanks for all your great work on that, Mr. Key, on the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, council members. Any other questions?
Yeah, you talked about the two-way potential, and there's one thing that I'm really interested in is people being able to check on conditions of approval.
Yes.
I assume that under the reports that you click on, you can find the conditions that were attached on a project. Is there a way to build in a functionality so that you can find out who's actually responsible for keeping that enforcement?
Yes. The planning department has a new system which have not been really fully implemented because of the coordination amongst departments. It's called CDMS, called Condition Development and Management System. That system, when hopefully very soon fully implemented, will track each development condition individually and see if it's signed off and who's responsible for it and the status of compliance. And that, because it's data, it has a very small footprint. We should be able to link it to the online map, the app, very easily.
So if there's a condition of approval for a 20-unit building that it has to have 4 units of affordable, there would be a way for someone to check to see who's in charge of enforcing that condition and find out when the last time someone was that checked that the unit is actually affordable?
Correct. The status of the compliance.
That's excellent. Could we have a separate meeting just in my office? I'd like to really get into the weeds on this.
Of course, Councilman.
Thank you.
Great. Well, so without objection, we'll adopt the motion, direct staff to provide a written report on the feasibility of developing a mobile app for ZMAS, and great motion to bring forward. Thank you for doing that.
Thank you for your support.
Thank you.
And without objection, it's adopted. Item 7, as I mentioned at the beginning, we are continuing for 30 days, so we're going to move directly to item 8.
Item number 8 is an item that was continued last August 27, 2013. It's a City Clerk and ITA joint report relative to the live remote virtual testimony and webcasting during Council Committee meetings, including related matters to initiate a pilot program. This item is also referred to the Budget and Finance Committee. We have no cards on this item.
No cards, great. So we're getting ready. It's exciting. We're simulating remote virtual testimony with staff from ITA. We're going to get a better sense of how this is going to look when it's up and running. And I appreciate the staff being here. And look at that. We have the camera right there. Although, of course, as we look here, then it doesn't look like we're looking into the camera, but that's why it's a test.
Exactly.
So you go forward and let us know how we get started.
Good afternoon. Holly Walcott, Interim City Clerk. I'm here with Mark Wolf from ITA and Lottie Ferguson from ITA. And what's in front of you is a joint report from both departments, and our recommendation is that if the council would like to move forward on remote testimony, that we use the Google Hangout solution. And so we brought it here today to, as you say, to simulate the process. And how we envision it working would be for the member of the public who wants to provide remote testimony to contact the legislative assistant in the city clerk's office more than 4 hours in advance of the meeting, and we might be able to, as time moves on, shorten that time, but for now, for logistical reasons, we would ask that there would be a 4-hour cutoff, and so that we can be ready to invite the people to speak. So a person would contact the legislative assistant in the city clerk's office. The city clerk's office would have a list. Contact ITA. ITA would set up the Google Hangout session. one of our two staffs would then invite the speaker. And the way Google Hangouts works is that once the speakers are invited, you would see them, as you see ghost images along the bottom right now, and those people are sitting in a queue in a waiting room waiting to be invited into the meeting. So we would then, of course, make sure the chair had a card that, similar to a public speaker now, would know that there was a public speaker in the queue, and we would give them to you in the order that the people came in. Now, in Google Hangouts, there's the ability for a total of 10 slots, with this room being one of them, so there would be room for nine outside participants at any given time. And again, initially we would ask that we stay to that 9, that we try not to do a revolving door because we're just not experienced enough to invite and disinvite people. So if the chair were to, for example, to invite Roger Fernandez to join the meeting, we would say, Roger, please introduce yourself. Roger, go ahead and say hello.
All right. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and committee members. My name is Roger Fernandez, and I'm with ITA. It's a great honor to be testifying in front of you using the remote video testimony test system. I'm really excited to be part of this project. I look forward to be part of many more projects that make our city more efficient and brings transparency to the residents of the city of Los Angeles. Together, we're making it easier for people to reach City Hall and therefore making Los Angeles a better place to live and work. Thank you.
Now, one of the things that Roger would have the ability to do is he would have the ability to mute us. And he could, as one of the speakers, mute the entire transmission. So it would be up to the administrator, the Google Hangouts administrator, which Lonnie is currently serving as, to unmute us. So we would probably institute a process or policy, ask the council to institute a policy, that if somebody is doing that to be disruptive, that we disinvite them from the meeting. Because even though we could catch it and turn it back on, you wouldn't want that to disrupt the meeting. Now, also, you could have a situation where somebody is having inappropriate conduct or inappropriate comments. We would also be able to disconnect them or mute them at any given time. So then the next speaker we have Ben Vong. So
good afternoon, Council Member. My name is Bin Vong, and I work for ITA, the Desktop Support Section. I'm connecting in to test a live remote testimony, and I think this is a great way for the public to connect.
And then we have Ryan Norwal. Sorry, Ryan.
No worries. Hello, committee chair and committee members. I'm Ryan Norwal with ITA. Work with BIN and desktop support, and it's an honor to work with all of you on this project, and I look forward to helping in any way possible.
So that's basically in a nutshell how it works. The pre-production is, as I described it, that the clerk would work with ITA to set up the Google Hangout section and then invite the speakers. There wouldn't be any post-production because it automatically publishes to YouTube, but since the audio would be picked up by Granicus and as part of our current archives, there would be no reason for us to do anything, with the video post. Now, the reason we chose Google Hangouts is, as you all know, there's no real testimony solution out there for the sole purpose. So we were looking at solutions that were video conferencing. And the city's current contract, Google contract, has this availability at no cost. So the only cost to the city would be the staff to operate it, and then there's some equipment. But I'm going to turn it over to ITA to discuss what some of those costs are.
Can I ask a question first, Mr. Chair?
Sure.
Go ahead.
You said a couple times that the reason Google Hangout was selected. I remember the conversation differently. I remember that there were a couple different technologies that you guys...
we were looking at several different ones. However, without going to an RFP, the city attorney has advised that we not violate Government Code 1090, which would be to have those people participate in a pilot, which might look like we were having them participate in how the city makes its policy decisions. So and this particular one had no cost. The others, we would have either had to gone off CompuCom if they were on the city's contract, but we weren't going to be able to pilot them.
I thought we had agreed that there were 3 different, and we were going to experiment with each so we could compare and
Right,
contrast.
and that's what I'm saying we're not able to do for Government 10 Code 90 reasons. Laurel Leitner from the City Attorney's Office.
I heard the punt as it was punted.
Good afternoon. If you have some questions about contracting, I'm probably the one who should answer them because I'm the one who looked at the request to have a pilot program right now. One of the issues that comes up with a pilot program that is not performed under the auspices of a competitive process is that if we just choose someone who's willing to come in here for free and set up a system, then that person becomes our consultant. And that person then would tell us, oh, well now, if you really like this and we tweak this so that it works exactly the way you want it, we will come in and, provide a contract for you. What would happen then is 2 problems. We would not have had the competitive process that's required under the charter and the ad code for contracts that are in excess of $25,000. And we would have created a situation where a consultant who had a financial interest in the contract participated in the contracting decision. And that's prohibited under State Government Code Section 1090, which is an extensive conflicts of interest code. So that if you wanted to have a pilot process, the cleanest way to do it would be as a part of your competitive process for the ultimate live remote service that you are seeking. And then we'd have proposals submitted by all of those who were interested in submitting proposals, and then the evaluation team would evaluate those and pick the top 1, 2, or 3. And then if the council decided to, we would have a pilot project under those circumstances, which would allow for complete competition, openness, and fairness in contracting.
But if we're just using what's generally commercially available and city clerk is implementing it and we're not using anyone from Microsoft or another company that would be deemed a consultant, what would the problem be?
Commercially available to us under current contract or commercially available
to the general public?
Well, see, we are required to have competitive process just even if the products are commercially available. That's what our charter and code require. So what we can do, and I think what they are showing now, is we actually have a current contract with Google that allows us to use the Google solution. That would give you the opportunity, without further competition, to use Google for the duration of the Google contract, see how you like that, and then as a part of the competitive process for an ongoing system, if council should determine that that's what they want, then we could have additional pilot programs that would not compromise any of those who participated in the competitive process.
Let me ask, one last question. I'm going to try to find a way around this. If I do a community town hall, an online town hall, I can use one of the other technologies if it's just me, yes?
Are you paying? I'm not entirely sure that you can do that and be consistent with the code.
I won't say any more. I'll just ask for forgiveness as opposed to permission. And then we'll share what we learned.
Okay. Well, this is a good demonstration. It's interesting. When I think of this, I think of not just the remote testimony from the public, but the possibilities of bringing in experts. So we're talking about the Wi-Fi proposal and how did it go in Philadelphia. We get the CAO of Philadelphia to beam in and give us, and I'm assuming that would be fairly easy with this process. We make our invited guests one or two of the 9 people, and we call on them, give them the same time allotment we would any other expert witness, and then move on to the public. The other aspect you were saying, I didn't quite understand the mute thing. If somebody can, I'm assuming they can mute it so they don't have to, so if the kid's screaming in the background, we don't have to hear it.
Right. Can you bring Roger back up, please?
Not that anyone's children are ever screaming in the background.
Yes?
So, Roger, can you mute us, please?
Yes.
See, he now just muted us. That means there is nobody who's watching this that can hear anything. He muted the entire thing.
He muted the entire thing, so
Yeah.
he muted this room as opposed to muting himself.
Right.
Is there a way to mute yourself and not mute?
Yes, he can do that too. But what I'm saying is you could have the potential of somebody doing that.
Right.
But Lonnie can then unmute us.
Yeah. I mean, would that be an innocent mistake, or is that pretty obvious that you're doing that to muting the whole thing?
It would depend. I mean, you could have people doing inappropriate things.
Sure.
Or you could have people making mistakes. That's why I would have a tendency, if somebody did it once, okay, maybe they messed up. But if they were doing it on a continual basis, we would probably just invite them from the meeting.
And really what they're doing is they're preventing the other people remote testimony. Obviously, we can still hear each other, but they're preventing us
And
from...
YouTube, yeah. And whoever would be watching it.
And is the YouTube, is that live, or is that...
It's running live, about a 45-second delay.
Now, is that just for the remote testimony, or is that then the entire hearing, potentially?
Whatever the Google Hangouts administrator...
So,
Ferguson, ITA.
I guess what I'm saying, and I get we can choose it, but the other great advantage of doing this is we're giving ourselves remote capacity, which we may or may not take full advantage of. But the other side effect is we are webcasting our committee hearings, which is previously hasn't been available.
Right. I mean, we would have to decide. I mean, one of our recommendations is, though, that if there's no public speakers, that we not have it. But if you wanted to have it, for all meetings, that might change the number of staff that we require. At right now, I think what ITA is saying that they could handle at most 3 meetings at the same time. But again, I don't want to step on Mark's toes about the cost and staffing required.
Why would it be? I mean, if we don't have any remote testimony, isn't it just a matter of kind of turning it on and coming by at the end of the meeting and turning it off, or is it more complicated than that?
Council members, Mark Wolf with ITA. I guess the slight variation on that would be today, the way the city's website's set up, we have a vendor, Granicus, that has all the archive meeting content, whether it be audio from committee meetings or full video that's searchable for council meetings. So all that information is in one accessible archive. So today, the way this solution is built, once you finish a meeting and hit stop, the YouTube video is then published of that meeting, and it would then be accessible as a separate place to search and review videos for the city's government channel, if you will. So the information would not be linked. Someone would have to manually take that video content if we wanted it to be attached to the same data source. They'd have to do manual processing of it and then file it and then publish it. There would be more staff time required to do that. So for that, we were trying to look at a solution that would still keep, at this juncture, the audio live stream as the official record of the meeting, and the video content would come in the event that we had we had remote testimony, and we had individuals coming to present. So this was just an option that we put forward as kind of a proof of concept process, and this is really open for discussion to get your feedback to see what you think and what other types of things that we should take into consideration as we're kind of developing the process.
I want to make certain of something. Just point of clarification, Holly. So Roger was able to mute both Ben and Ryan as well.
Right.
But only because they're calling from the same office.
Right.
No.
And nobody would have been. But they
So anyone, even if it's 9 different remote places, one person could mute the
Right.
whole
They
lot.
muted us too.
Okay, that's a problem.
So that is, as Holly indicated, this specific solution, along with other solutions that are in the marketplace provided by other vendors that are in this space, they're designed for video conferencing, which can take a variety of different types of flavors, where it could be a setting like this where you want to bring someone in remotely and have them testify and give information, or it could be a meeting that is more interactive where each participant, as they have additional information to add to the meeting, could interject and then their information would be heard. So it's not designed for a public testimony application. There are some little gotchas like that. We don't think there are fatal flaws in terms of usage of the application, but there's something that certainly, as we would use them, we've gained experience to see if this is something that's a feasible tool solution to be able to be leveraged for this type of an application.
I'm trying not to do a rant. We tried to do a couple different technologies in an ill-fated attempt at doing this at my initial T committee meeting, and there isn't the perfect technological fix for what we want to do yet, and there's different systems that offer different benefits, different capabilities, different challenges, and different shortcomings. This mute thing is definitely a huge shortcoming. The fact that everybody is in a group conversation is not necessarily the proper dynamic for committee testimony. But it also has some great advantages. The fact that you could basically be streaming and you have the YouTube recording capability. I say that because I thought it was very important to try different technologies. And I got to say, I think that with all due respect to the city attorney, I think that the opinion that we can't is overly broad and is wrong, and it ties our hands, and it's the kind of thing that stifles the spirit of innovation in the city. And I think it's ridiculous that we can't experiment with something anybody at home could be experimenting with in order to try a new technology. I just think it's absolutely ridiculous.
Well, then I think one of the things you might want to direct us to do is then go out to RFP, because that would be the solution to go around that. But in the meantime, if you wanted it faster, if you wanted to implement something right now, you could implement this while you direct us to go out to RFP.
I wouldn't stop doing this, because I think it's good to do whatever we can do. It's just the fact that we can't do more is...
Well, and are there downsides with going out to RFP right away? Because you were saying that then...
Well, the ITA is already out under RFP for email, so...
So potentially within the scope of the email and standard software RFP that's on the street right now, that includes a component comparable to this for video conferencing type capability functionality for the city. So potentially through that RFP process, there will be a tool that will be part of a bidder's proposal that could meet the needs of this type of an application. So that's an existing RFP that's in play right now. So potentially that could be leveraged as to be the permanent solution beyond the Google contract, which is in place through November of 2014.
If I may, might it need to be refined then, the RFP? Might it need to be refined a little further just to make sure that we don't get caught up in a limitation since it wasn't part of the original intent?
I think, Councilman, that the RFP is written broadly enough that it's use of that technology for whatever application and use the city feels they'd like to use it. So, for example, I'll use an analogy with word processing software. We need word processing software so that we could do contracts, we could do personnel policy documents, we could do legislative documents. We wouldn't be limited just by selecting the category of saying word processing to a specific use of that.
We could administratively define the requirements that we need to do this adequately.
That is correct.
Okay.
And going back to the question about the muting, it's going to be one of those things where until we actually put this into play, if we do, we won't know whether or not that becomes an issue or a non-issue. One of the things that is, I guess, a kind of a safety net for us on that particular issue is that the administrator of the meeting will be a city staff person, and they will have the ability to, if a person is doing this, whether it's inadvertent or intentional, they'll be able to disinvite them for the meeting, so they will not be part of the meeting. So it would have some impact on the flow of the meeting and time, but it would not be a major issue. There would be a way to handle that.
And the reason we came back with just Google Hangouts, just to reiterate, is because it is a part of an existing contract and it won't cost you anything to purchase. If we were to have tried any of the other solutions, we would have to enter into a contract or buy them. At this point, what we're talking about is requiring the equipment, i.e. the cameras and laptops, Mark, and then the staff as the Google administrators.
So if I could, if there's any further questions, maybe we should address those, and then I can talk through the recommendations of the report.
Yeah, a couple further questions before we get to that. I mean, back to the other issue about the using this as also a way to webcast our hearings. You were saying that might up the ante on the whole thing if we were webcasting all of the hearings as opposed to just, because that sort of my vision for it is if we're going to the expense of getting this equipment, webcasting the hearings is a step toward transparency. There's no reason why we shouldn't go there. And I understand you're saying the record, the current record is the audio record, and to make the video record also officially the video record would be a big project. But just to webcast them, I'm not sure why that would cost so much more or be a bigger.
I don't think there would be any major additional cost to doing that. It's just if we wanted to take the two different records and put them together, that would require manual processing by staff post the meeting.
Right.
So we would suggest or recommend that if you do want to go ahead and have the meeting live webcast, that we would just have that information at the conclusion of the meeting published to YouTube, and then the audio version of that go into the regular database that the city has for all of its archived content for committee meetings and for city council meetings.
Now, it would still live in YouTube, it just wouldn't be very searchable is the issue, right?
It would live in YouTube, and there would be ways where we could even we'd create a YouTube channel so that all of that content could be in a single location, and then somebody could go through that to be able to view or search the information they want.
And if there were, a particularly exciting hearing on an issue and we wanted to put on our websites, put a link to it, it wouldn't be that hard for us the day after to create a link to that YouTube portion or what have you and be able to get that going so that we would be able to drive traffic to the YouTube site on an as desired basis.
Sure.
That would be possible.
Okay, but it would just be a matter of when we decide to, we're webcasting the hearing from beginning to end, not just the remote testimony part.
Mm-hmm. That is correct.
Okay, well that makes more sense to me. I guess we can go to the recommendations and then we'll ask some questions.
The report basically before you summarizes kind of the information that we talked through today, that through our analysis, based on this being an existing city contract, that we would recommend for the time being to utilize this solution as the solution that would be utilized in council committee rooms at the discretion of each of the chairs of the committees. And in addition to that, in order to implement this solution, there's approximately $35,000 worth of equipment that is required in order to put in place in the 5 committee rooms and to have one spare to be able to address any parts that are not operational. It's approximately $35,000 as a one-time cost for the setup of the camera, some of the additional audio equipment that we put in place, because what we found through the testing, for example, is there was echoing that was occurring with the microphones that are currently in place for the audio here. So there's some additional equipment. So that total expense was $35,000. We had originally looked at potentially using cable franchise 1% money to fund that, but after further recent discussion this week with city attorney, they've advised us that it would be better to use general fund money if that content isn't exclusively going on Channel 35, if it's just being published to the web. So ITA is prepared to modify our recommendations in the report for recommendation number 2.
Why is that though? That 1% has to be for Channel 35? I thought that was just public access.
It's for Channel 35 cable broadcasting or webcasting, but I think the requirement that the city attorney enumerated on is that if the intent is just to publish it on the internet, not to then take that content and rebroadcast it on Channel 35, that based on the federal law, they felt that that potentially could have providers question our usage of the funds, and they felt that for this small expenditure amount, it would be just cleaner to just go ahead and utilize general fund money for that purpose. And within ITA's communication services budget, after looking at this number and what we would need to procure, we can absorb that within our existing budget for equipment for communication services. So we would just recommend the modification of that recommendation.
Okay, I guess that's clean. Even though I still don't understand fully why we couldn't do it, obviously that's a clean solution, and if you guys are willing to do that, that's great.
Just one kind of another brief example where we do utilize 1% monies for webcasting equipment. For example, all the city council meetings are all broadcast on Channel 35 as well as on the web. So the infrastructure that we have in place in order to webcast it, because the content is going out 100% of the time, always on Channel 35 and the web concurrently, the city attorney, based on their interpretation of the federal law, believes that that is eligible use of the 1% funds. But this one, because it varies, if we didn't exclusively publish the remote testimony out on Channel 35, they felt that there may be some questions on that. The third recommendation on the staffing side, in order to be able to administer a video remote testimony meeting, there needs to be an individual like Lonnie Ferguson here who's sitting in each of the meeting, who's doing the queuing of the speakers, who's working with the chair of the meeting to advance forward, and so forth. So in order to accomplish that within our existing resource, we need additional staff to assist us with that, and we could meet that with 2 part-time student workers. So we've asked for approximately $35,000 in new funds to be identified to be able to meet that need. And as Holly had indicated earlier, based on our experience in the number of meetings that get scheduled concurrently, it looks like 3 meetings, not greater typically than 3 meetings, get scheduled at a time. So with the 2 new staff that would be part-time staff to do this, plus one of our existing resources, we'd be able to cover that. So that would be additional monies that would need to be authorized in order for us to move forward with this. And the last recommendation would be for us to have ITA make a request to manage hiring for the actual backfilling and onboarding of these positions.
Great. Any questions about the recommendations? No. I just have a question about sort of the vision of how it would work. Part of the equipment that you're talking about buying is monitors or television screen. Those things don't work anymore, right?
That is correct. So basically we'd be buying
the TV set over there.
The camera, some audio equipment that goes wherever the audio is that addresses the echoing issue, and then last an LCD panel that would be on the wall that instead of seeing the monitor, the projector that we're using for displaying this, it would be projected on a panel up here.
So it'd just be one monitor in each committee room?
That is correct.
And it would be sort of on the side like it is now?
Yes.
And then 2 cameras, you're saying?
So the camera, this is a wide-angle camera that would just be one camera shooting up against the committee members.
Oh, it's just one camera in each room?
One camera in each room.
Kind of like the setup that we're envisioning.
And we'd have a spare on hand in the event that, one failed.
Are you talking about a camera kind of like that one, or an actual, permanently affixed camera type of thing?
That's something that actually I don't know the answer to that question. I think we're talking about a camera similar to this type of a camera that would be brought into play for use like this.
And it wouldn't be, it would be just a fixed, because I used to do, when we did field hearings in the assembly, they had a setup like this, and were able to put 2 different cameras, and basically there'd be one person with a joystick, and you could control where the cameras go, and it was sort of all one system. But this seems like a less complicated system.
That is correct, Councilman. This is a fairly low-cost solution. This is similar type of technology that's used like doing video conference type meetings.
Right.
similar types of cameras.
And it just plugs into our audio, so you don't need any extra microphones.
Correct.
It's just basically what we're looking at, except instead of a projector, you're talking about moving that monitor over a little bit.
Right. We're
Although,
trying to minimize the number of staff we need to, operate cameras and zoom in and zoom out.
great. Any other?
So what are we going to be doing something with an RFP then on a separate track to try different technologies?
If you direct us to do so.
Well,
I don't want to slow down that process or screw it up is the problem.
my recommendation, Councilman, would be to let the existing process that's underway with the email and standard software RFP take its course, because that's going to be in the near term in the next 2 months here, and look at the outcome of that, because it should accommodate, I think, the software needs for this type of functionality. So that may be the most expedient way to proceed with it. And in the meantime, we could leverage this solution as the current, interim solution.
So as part of the RFP process, you could ask, as Laurel was alluding to, you could ask for demonstrations at that time during the RFP process.
Well, Mr. Chair, I'll vote for this, but I am not going to stipulate that I will not be trying other technologies myself. I think I can't disagree more strongly with the advice of our council on this matter. A few years ago, before we went to a cloud-based system, when we were on Outlook, I was on my spare time working on the Obama campaign using Google Docs. And I found Google Docs to be so tremendously effective. Before we moved to a cloud-based system, I asked my staff to start using Google Docs for stuff. And the sky didn't fall down, and we didn't get our butts sued, and it wasn't the end of the world. And I think being able to experiment and using different technologies and different offices being innovative is a good thing. And this is a huge step forward that we're doing today. I am so happy we're doing it. I have to register that note of protest, because I just think it's just dead wrong.
Well, the flag is placed in the item, as you say.
Yep.
We'll move forward with the report, because it gets us the purchasing of the equipment and the process moving. And then if we can resolve the legal issues, then it'll be a snap to once we have, because the equipment's the same.
Yep.
Right. There's nothing different about any of the equipment. The equipment is off-the-shelf stuff. It'll just be a matter of implementing different software once we get that sort of kink worked out.
You got it. Thank you for this.
So I'd like to move the item with the change that was proposed in terms of the ITA absorbing the cost, the fixed infrastructure costs, and then the variable costs in terms of the staffing. We're moving that forward as an item of request for general fund. And with that, without objection, it's so moved.
It's also been referred to Budget and Finance, so we'll go to Budget and Finance next.
Okay, great.
Oh, I get another crack at it.
Yes.
Yes, you do.
Cool.
Yes, we do. Item number 9. And thank you both very much. Thank you, all three of you. And actually all of our remote people who are gone now, but they can't hear me.
Item number 9 is a verbal report from the General Manager of ITA on department priorities.
Steve Renniker, General Manager of the ITA. We just went live with a new project portfolio system that you're seeing the reports from today. For the public, I have them off to the side as well. For the very first item, I'm just going to go over the top 10. There's actually an attachment that shows our top 25, but I'll just cover the top 10. The first one on there is a problem that we currently have in the city, which is around Windows XP, which goes end of life on April the 8th. And I'll put this report over there as well. As of October 1st, what we are doing is going to each of the departments, and we're getting their current status on what replacements they have on their desktops. Because to kind of frame the vulnerability that we're up against today, had a meeting with Microsoft to talk specifically about what our level of jeopardy is. Because if you look at all of our desktops, we have Semantic as our antivirus solution. But as of April the 8th, Microsoft will no longer do their weekly updates on their operating system. So what's happening in the community right now is every Tuesday when Microsoft releases their vulnerabilities, you have all the hacker groups that are out in the community that take a look at what those changes were that Microsoft made, and they make all of their hacking code associated to take advantage of those vulnerabilities to attack those that have not upgraded. That is what happens today. It's been going on a long time. It's the reason why organizations, when Microsoft releases their patches, immediately do the patches because they don't want to be left vulnerable. What is going to happen after the 8th of April is Microsoft will no longer do these updates. They're making it very clear that everybody left is subject to the hacking community and all those vulnerabilities. Right now, we are at about 15,000, a little over 15,000 desktops that are subject to that vulnerability. I'm going to be meeting with each of the department heads to explain what the process will be if they were to have an event after April the 8th. And really, the only thing that ITA has control of and the only thing that we could do is if there is an incident that does occur, we control the network. And what we would have to do if there was a vulnerability at a particular site is we would disconnect that whole site until the remediation efforts have been able to be done. Now, it's not as a matter of just having a virus, clean up the virus, turn the system back up and reconnecting. It could be a vulnerability such they would have to replace all their desktops or a desktop at that particular organization, which could take a length of time. So communicating to the department heads on the impacts of this is serious. The whole impact on this to the city is about $13.5 million. There is no budget for it. All the departments are being told to absorb those dollars. So every month what I'm doing is going to be reporting to both you and to the ITOC committee regarding these vulnerabilities. The items in red are those departments right now that have indicated they have funding issues associated with being able to do remediation. And so I just flagged those to your attention. We'll be working with the departments to try to get as many corrected as possible. So that's going to be my number one through April 8th, I guarantee you, because I don't see that there's anything else that's putting the city more at risk from a security perspective than that right now. On item number 2, on Thursday, we have the bidders conference for the email and desktop enterprise standard RFP. As we talked about, it's not just mail, email, and office. It also includes a long list of products that the departments have all weighed in on that they have preference for their city standards to the desktop and the server level. So we're excited about that moving forward. Responses will be due back at the end of the year. We already discussed the broadband RFP. This past Friday on October the 4th on item number 4, we have the Chief Information Security Officer position. We got 40 resumes for that. Over the next 2 to 3 weeks, I'll be interviewing several candidates along with the CISO at the County of Los Angeles and the CIO from LAPD to make selection. Item number 5 is our first of a 5-series effort. We've identified through a security assessment 5 vulnerabilities that the city had. We're making great strides. As of this weekend, we will complete this particular effort, which will provide stability around all of our web applications, because our web applications are running on network components that were all end of life. So we're excited about that going forward. We've already discussed item number 6 regarding the Wi-Fi, and soon to be expanded to other floors as needed. And
just looking out for you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And item number 7 we discussed. Item number 8, we had a kickoff last week. The mayor was very kind, along with you, Mr. Chairman, to be there to kick off the meeting. We're very appreciative of that. The staff is very excited. It's about a 12-month effort. It's very aggressive, but it'll deliver a very state-of-the-art solution for our 311 call center and being able to do those metrics and be able to address the citizen issues in a much more timely fashion. We also have, on item number 9, we have forwarded a draft to the Controller's Office on a new mobile and bring-your-own-device policy. Right now, in order to have a city mobile device, has to be city-issued, can't be used for personal use at all, according to the existing policy. What we're doing right now, because what happens with everybody that has a city-issued device, they also have another personal device. So most people are carrying 2 devices around the city. What we're recommending is that in addition to a city-issued device, there would be an option for a stipend. Now, that does mean that departments would have to budget for the stipend, but it does provide flexibility so that those folks that want to go down to a central device, a single device, it'd have to be managed by a mobile data management platform so that the security and the city-associated data on the device are protected, then they would have that capability. So that's under review, and hopefully we'll bring that forward after controller review back to this committee.
Explain it to me again, because thinking my own, I use an iPhone, which is, I don't use the city phone, but I get all my city information on it.
So what this policy would do, as an example, the recommended stipend for that particular platform would be $45. That would be something to be added to the payroll as a credit to you for using your personal device that you paid for and the associated monthly bill for city use. So all the city data that's on it would require, number one, that you have, it would be password protected device. So if you lost it, somebody would need to know your passcode to get in. The second item, it would require that it would be able to be remote wiped. So should you notify the city your device was stolen, we could remote wipe all the data or just the city data. So if it was an employee that was terminated, we could just wipe out the city data and leave all the personal data alone. And then other future components that we're looking for and that we're currently out to bid for mobile data management is those 48 mobile apps we're talking about. So when that ZMIS application comes out, wouldn't it be nice to be able to automatically deploy that? Or in this case, maybe all you do is deploy My LA 311 app, and all of those other ones are there. And so all the employees in the city that were on this platform would automatically have loaded on their device the city mobile app portal. So that really is the strategy going forward with this particular policy. And the last one is the strategic advisor, Avasant. They've met with all the departments. They are in the process of setting up their executive committee meeting, which will basically provide the results from their initial findings. They're in the data collection phase. So based on these findings, they're now putting costs associated with those, and then they'll be putting forward a series of recommendations next month that will be presented to the ITOC committee on ultimately what they see as the most cost-effective strategy for the city to go to from an overall IT strategy. So that is our top 10 for this month.
Great. I like the top 10 list. Although you could do it more Letterman style and start with number 10 and then work your way to number 1. But
try to build up to something fun or something.
Yeah. But I don't have any particular. Any of my colleagues have questions on these top 10. This is great, and this is really I think a good feature of this hearing is bringing forward the top 10. It does help, even having the top 25 list. It really does help keep us focused and keep the city focused. So thank you for doing that.
Certainly.
All right. And last but not least, we already did items 10 through 18. So without further ado, I guess that's it. So I will officially end this hearing. This hearing is now adjourned. Thank you all for coming.